Greetings, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today for our next interview in the Two Hands and a Heart project. And I am super excited for today's conversation. And it's a conversation that has been kind of coming in my life for a long time. And I'm just so thrilled that we'll be able to share this with you. Today, I would love to introduce you to my beautiful sister, Alexandra Beepat, who is in Northern Virginia, creating beautiful work and is a tremendous voice of change. Is the owner of the Lotus and the Light Metaphysical Center in Manassas, Virginia, and she offers coaching and intuitive work as well as teaching spiritual development classes in her community as well as online. She also published a book, The Awakened Life, and hopefully we'll be able to hear more about that as we unfold our conversation today. Truly believes that we all have the power to create the changes we desire for a happy and abundant life. Thank you so much for being with us today for this important conversation.
I'm so excited to be here, Angela. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for having your platform, which I feel is very needed, especially in this day and age. So thank you.
My true pleasure. So I'm surprised. I feel so connected to you, but we've actually never met in person before.
Facebook friends.
Facebook friends. Thank God for Facebook for these kind of sweet connections. We've been connecting for quite a while now on social media around the topics of today's conversation, and it's one that I believe is super necessary in the metaphysical community. We're going to talk about engaged spirituality and the importance of fully embodying our ideas and practices. But first, let's start with a little background. Can you tell us a little more about you?
Okay. I call myself a child of the world because I was blessed to be able to grow up across different cultures, different countries, different locations. So I was born in London, but I actually grew up in Barbados in the Caribbean and in Guyana, South America, which is part of the West Indies. So I definitely come from a very strong Caribbean background, which if you meet Caribbean people, we're very loud and boisterous. I think we're akin to Italians over here, you know, the way we talk and our mannerisms and everything. Outside of that, I've lived, like I said, outside of the US, but I've also lived around the US as well. So there's a lot of things going on here in that I've been exposed to a lot of life from a very young age. I had a passport since I was 0 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, I've traveled to 6 of the 7 continents. I've been to over 30 countries. The thing is that when you start to have this bigger understanding of what life is outside of the box that you're in, things aren't just as black and white anymore. There's a lot of gray. Actually, there's a lot of beautiful color. And that is what prompted me as I continued on in life to develop spiritually. So I am the owner of the Lotus and Light Metaphysical Center. I've been the owner for 11 years. In 11 years, I've worked personally on over 10,000 people. I'm certified in over 45 modalities. I can do it all, right? And that's why I speak out now. Because the funny thing is back in the day, even though I know what I know, back then, I didn't have the courage or the confidence to speak my mind because, I was just starting out, 1 year and 2 years, and who are you? But after you've been like a somewhat of a dominating force for 11 years in your particular area, then you feel a little bit more ballsy to come out and say, I'm going to say some things and you need to hear me. So this discussion today with Angela is, to me, very much needed in the spiritual community. And it's coming from a place of love. I want you guys to know I'm going to be like that mom that loves you, but it still has to like, come on now, we know better. All right. And I hope that you guys receive it with love as well.
I love it. And I think that's important. Like, love isn't always gentle. Sometimes love is tough.
And it's out of love that it's tough, because if we see you going down a wrong path, out of love and care and concern, we want to pull you back and say, hey, look at this, address this. And that takes a lot of strength to do. So we're going to have these uncomfortable discussions today, but I hope that you walk away with something that is truly meaningful and helpful.
Beautiful. I'm curious, did you grow up in connection with spiritual or religious practices or traditions?
My whole life. Yeah. It was interesting moving to America when I was 18, because our cultures are so different. In the South American, West Indian culture, we believe a lot in practices and rituals and superstitions, old wives' tales, if you will. They carry a lot of merit. So I was very much encouraged as a child, whereas I know a lot of Americans aren't. So when I was growing up, if I had a bad dream, my mother would find out about it and she would know what that dream meant. If I wasn't feeling well, my grandmother would put onion skins under my pillow. We just have a lot of ritual that we grew up with that was just a normal part of life. So when I came here and I started having students who were like, yeah, I had abilities when I was younger, but it got shut off or people didn't believe me. It was so foreign to me as a concept. This is my life. I'm what we call a spirit walker. I walk between the realms frequently. I've been doing that since I was a child. And it's just interesting to see how much of you that live in America or probably other countries as well have had that right taken away from you. It was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of the deep sicknesses that the people in the Western world really face on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And unknowingly, like we've lost our cultures, we've lost our traditions, we've lost our connection with the greater than human world, and the sickness that has come into us through that is a driving force behind a lot of the problems. And it's also certainly the thing attracting people to metaphysical practices and ways now, because we want to have some kind of connection. But in order to do that authentically and deeply, we have to heal the things that continue to disrupt those things from being able to integrate fully.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious, knowing that you came from this background where these things were just kind of normal.
Yeah.
How did you find your way to the work that you now share with the community?
So what we call people like me is we're natural mediums. So we've been seeing, speaking, hearing, talking to spirit ever since we were little. I know most people that I work with are what we call developed mediums, where they come into that gift of spirit communication as they get older, as the soul develops. So it's been natural for me, but it wasn't until I turned 30 that I heard a voice outside of me. Usually, you hear the voices in your head, and it was like someone sitting next to me on my bed. And they said it was very plain. The time for playing is over. It's now time to work. And then I felt like a presence just like lifted me up out of the bed. And I got down on my knees and I did this. I said, I know nothing, teach me everything. And that was the call. And that was the response. And then that was what I call the initiation of my soul onto this path. So then spirit led me to massage school. I didn't have to pay for it. It was all paid for. Mm. And then after that, they led me to Reiki and then reflexology. And there's this deep desire for truth and knowledge within me. I always say in life with the light workers, they like to take two paths, the path of love or the path of truth. And I'm definitely on the path of truth. I respect the path of love, but I'm here to know why. And I'm here to ask those questions to figure out the whys. And it just developed and developed. So I really originally started as a physical healer. But, spirit knows who you are and who you're going to be. And I have to tell you that over the course of 11 years, I have changed my job title so many times. And that's why I tell people it's so important not to stick to, I need to know what I'm here to do. I still don't know what I'm here to do. The only thing I do know is I'm here to serve. And in service, I find my path and the next step I take. So that's how I was called. It was really that voice at 30 that said, it's time to work.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think too, like that kind of evolution that you're naming in what you're sharing, like I can connect with that very much myself too, because it was like maybe 10 years ago where I was praying so strongly, like, please just tell me why I'm here. Why did I come to this life? Why did I incarnate? And after 9 months of really deep, soulful seeking for that, I started to get some very clear answers that upended my reality in some major ways. And all of the things that I thought were my path were kind of ushered out the door. And now, like just over 10 years later, I'm sitting at the edge of something that's deeper. And the message that my guides keep saying to me now is like, what you do is merely a tool. Yeah. Like, what is the motive behind what you're doing?
That's
And
it.
then when you're clear on that, all of the things that you do are merely in service to that. And it's
Yes.
the constant deepening, as we continue to grow and evolve, like to ask, and what's beneath that? And then what's beneath that? And what's beneath that? And
It's
I'm
like
grateful.
peeling away the layers of the onion, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, I am really excited to hear you talk about something that we were discussing just before we started this call. We were talking earlier about spiritual escapism,
Mhm.
and it's one of the biggest challenges in our community. Can you say a bit more about this?
Right. So, as a spiritual teacher, I've seen many, many people come through my center. Some for short term, some for long term, some are still here, at my center. And the one thing I've noticed time and time again is that there's a particular group of people that say they want to develop their spirituality. They want to be on the spiritual path. They want to do a line of work that's more in alignment with their calling. And then after a couple of months, or maybe even after a year or two, they fall off. We never hear from these people again. And I got curious about that. And I was like, how are they doing? So then I would start to like go on Facebook snoop, and kind of go online and say, what's this person doing? And I would notice just from the way they post that they were still in the same position they were before they took all the classes. So then I said, oh, this is interesting. So I sat with Spirit for many months on this, just meditating and asking, what is this about? Because me as a teacher in the line of service, I'm here to serve, but at the end of the service, there should be something to show for it. So how am I with not all, most of my students are fine, but with this particular group, how is it that they've taken all the classes, not just from me, but from all the teachers? And then years later, they're still complaining or unhappy or unfulfilled. Like, what is it? And then Spirit spoke very clearly to me about spiritual escapism, that there is a small part of the community that aren't really in the spiritual path for development. They're in the path for distraction. They have a lot going on in their lives. They don't have a good relationship with their partner. Their job is not what they want it to be. Their children are not thankful, whatever. They're empty. There's a void. They come here to the spiritual community looking for connection and community and healing, but they're not actually interested in the healing part. So they will sit in the classes, they will be your loudest allies, they will clap for you and cheer for you. But then the minute you point them out, hey, I need you to actually do this work now, it's too much. It's too much. They go up in arms, then they leave the community. One of the worst things I hate hearing is when people say to me, because this topic, a lot of these topics come up a lot when I'm at dinner parties and stuff, because that's the line of work I do. And what I hear is oh, I tried the spiritual path, but it wasn't for me. Well,
Oh, yeah.
you're pretty much saying then that you are not for you. Because all the spiritual path is a development, a personal development of understanding who you are at an innate level. And then learning what to do with that in service to yourself, to your community, and to humanity. That's what the spiritual path is. So if you say the spiritual path is not for me, you have turned your back on yourself. And now I'm even more curious, Gemini moon here. Why? What is so hard there? What is so deep and dark and hidden? So I'm pretty sure, Angela, you have probably seen spiritual escapism. A lot of people who attend your events, but then when they're actually called upon personally to show up, they can't.
Absolutely. And it almost seems like it's a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
And my background before starting to work in sound medicine was as a classical musician. Like I'm a classically trained flutist.
Beautiful.
And when I felt the call of spirit to leave that path behind and to move in the direction of working with music and sound for healing and transformation, I was so excited to be able to have this deeper connection, because honestly, sometimes as a classical musician, I felt like a show monkey and I was over it. Like I didn't feel like I was able to connect with people deeply. And a lot of the time when I am doing this work with people, I do feel that deeper connection. But then again, it comes around a lot to just being a new form of entertainment.
Yeah.
And I think because that's something that I spent so much of my life doing, it's something that I really shrink away from now. And one of the words that I am trying on more and more in my life is being an interrupter. Uh,
Oh.
being an interruption of the comfort that we seek sometimes when we go to these kinds of classes or these kinds of
Yeah.
experiences. People want to be nurtured and cared for, and that's good. Like, I'm all for that. But when it ceases to carry you forward in any way, when it ceases to help you to not only reset your nervous system in the moment, but figure out what is happening in your life that keeps you from being able to stay in a more centered, connected place, like, there's a problem. It's
There
not
is.
integrated. It's just an experience. And like, before I went to Peru the first time in 2005,
Love
I
Peru.
read this great book by Alberto Villoldo. I can't
Mhm.
remember the title of it right now. But when he met his teacher, he was a young hotshot kid, and his teacher, who at the time he didn't know was his teacher yet, said, "Do you seek to have an experience, or do you seek to serve an experience?"
Mm.
And when I read those words, I didn't know what they meant, but I knew that I needed to remember them. And so they've been with me now for 15 years, and I continue to ask myself that. I continue to bring that to my students and my clients too. Like, what is your goal here? What is the motive beneath it?
Yeah.
Are you willing to be uncomfortable? Because comfort isn't the promise. Comfort
That's
isn't the
not it.
goal.
And there's in our life, there is space for that, but you got to go through the darkness first before you get there. So for me, I do want to come to a sound bath to rest and to be in that peace. But guess what? That's because I've spent all day on the battlefield. I've had people tell me, go back to my country and, you're
Mm,
this, I'd run you for the car if I saw you. So when I'm looking now for a sound bath, it's not to distract, it's to heal.
yeah,
It's to heal. And that's what I'm trying to say to the spiritual community is, unless you do your deep shadow work, you find yourself one of these beautiful shadow healers and work on that stuff that's triggering you. Even if you go to these sound baths and whatever, something will always trigger you unless you get to the root and pull it out.
absolutely.
I'm
And
seeing one of
sometimes,
my, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and I think sometimes for people who live lives that are so filled to the brim that they don't have the time or the space to do that work, it's in that kind of experience. It's in meditation, it's in a sound journey, it's in something that seems, fairly benign, that those things have the opportunity to start to emerge. And then again, like what you were saying before, people
Yeah.
don't want any more of it. They're like, "Ooh, I'm gonna step off now." And
It's the new church. You remember how we came hard at Christians for being so fake and two-faced back in the day? Back in the day, we would say, okay, you would go to church on Sunday and then you're a heathen the whole week. But then on Sunday, you're back to a perfect Christian. It's the same thing. Okay, so you go to yoga on Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and you go to meditation on Monday, Fridays, but the weekends, you're a jerk, you know? And that it's the same thing. And it's people with bad behavior in those communities coming into these communities with the same bad behavior and not like saying, wait a minute, the problem isn't the outside world or these teachers or the institutions. The problem is me. And I need to look into what I'm running from and just face it head on. And we have so many tools, as Angela's a teacher, I'm a teacher. There's so many beautiful teachers out here. We have so many tools to help you, but we can't lead the horse to the water. You got to get there and meet us and then open up to us. And then here's another thing spiritual teachers have to face: the retribution for charging for our time.
yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, Angela, but I don't live in a monastery or an ashram. So I have to provide my own food. I have to provide laundry detergent to wash all them clothes for them kids that I got and myself. And, that costs money. So then when you finally get somebody, this horse, to come to the water, agreeing finally it's thirsty, and then you're saying, well, you got to open the gate to get to the pond. That's where the horse is trying to give up and say, well, you didn't tell me there was going to be a gate here. Why isn't it just free? Why isn't the lake just open to everybody? So it's just, there's so many layers to this that I can talk on, and I'm sorry I'm going off track, but
No,
there's
no,
so many layers.
I agree with you, and I've had the same experiences. And it's like, the traditional religious institutions give a really clear framework. This is how it works. You sit here, somebody talks to you, they tell you how it is, and you do your best to kind of submit to that. And I think sometimes when people come to these new age practices and ways, there's so much more openness. There's so much more space for everyone to share.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's just like a potluck. It's
Yeah.
not just a potluck, like just because it's not in the power over paradigm, it's a power with paradigm, but there's still somebody who's facilitating and kind of guiding the structure, who's dedicated their entire life path to that.
Yeah.
It needs to be respected. You're absolutely right.
It has to be respected. I've seen so many beautiful ways of distraction over the years of how people distract from finding their truth. And the funny thing is, it's never just because sometimes people might say that are opposing, they might say, well, Uma, maybe they just don't want to work with you. No, that's not the case. I have resources. I have people like Angela's name and my other friends that I give. And I say, hey, if you don't want to work with me, that's fine. Here's a list of names that I personally vouch for and I recommend that you can work with. Of course, they charge. Nobody's going to do it for free, but that's the point. You're paying for their time and their experience and their expertise and what they've put into this. And it's still not, no, it's a distraction.
Yeah.
They want to talk about it for ages upon ages upon ages, but nobody really wants to settle down and actually do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Reciprocity, in all of my time that I spent in the Andes in Peru, I've been gradually learning more about this concept of aini, reciprocity, like the sacred exchange of giving and receiving. That is ultimately the law of life, but it's certainly the law of the land in that culture. And it's very much the opposite of what you're naming in this conversation and what I've certainly seen plenty as well. Yeah. So one of the conversations that we have had a number of times online is connected to the tendency within the metaphysical community to use the law of attraction to avoid confronting some pretty serious issues in our world. And I've seen this idea circulating as a reaction to protesters quoting George Floyd's final words, "I can't breathe." People seem to believe that when they talk about these issues, they will create more of them. And in turn, by not talking about them, they will not continue to be manifested in the world. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Right. So I love talking about law of attraction because I think most people get it wrong. That's why it's not manifesting in their lives. Law of attraction is not some petty, I can't curse. It's not some petty bee that's just sitting there with like a notepad and pencil, keeping track of your every move. It doesn't work like that. Law of attraction is just a natural law. It says what you put out there is what you're going to get more of. It's not based on words. It's based off of energy. So if you are a beautiful protester and you are walking and you're chanting, "I can't breathe," the law of the universe is not going to come back and say, now we got to make sure that she can't breathe and insert this in her life. But you know what the law of the universe is going to do? It's going to look at her energy. And what is her energy in that moment in time? Community, because she's joining with other people about human rights. And she's speaking out against injustices by using her voice, her body, her time, her resources to do that. Fellowship, as she joins hundreds of other people and she's walking with them, right? Boldness and courage of standing up for something that she believes in. That is the energy she's putting out there. What do you think is going to come back to her? More opportunities for boldness and courage, more community, okay? And more blessings and abundance. Because the thing is when you do a thing that is outside of you, that serves you and your circle being your home, your family, your neighbor, whatever, when you do a thing that is really what we call unconditional and selfless, where you have no dog in the game, you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, you attract the attention of the ascended masters because they have spent their entire lives doing exactly that same thing, right? So yes, I support the protesters and I chant with them, "I can't breathe." And what has happened to my life? It has completely flowered. I'm having a ton more people find me on Facebook and friend requesting me and joining my classes and joining my talks. And it's not from advertising. It's just from me joining my voice with all these protesters and saying, we need change now. We cannot sleep on this anymore. We need change now. So for those of you that are afraid of the law of attraction, you might want to book a session with me. I'm gonna just put that in there because you might want to book a session with me because we got to talk about what the law of attraction really is. And the fact is, it's not a fear-based thing. It's not fear-based. So if you're just start there. I'm afraid to lend because what you put your attention on is where the energy goes. Yeah. So you're putting your attention on equality, and social reform and justices, yes. What's wrong with that? Why would you not want your energy to go there?
Exactly. Yes, all day long. That exactly. I've worked with this amazing teacher, Joanna Macy,
Mhm.
and we were once on a call with her during a training program. And this is a question that I actually brought to her. And she's somebody who's like lived all over the world, and like her husband was contributing founder of like the Peace Corps when that was born.
Oh, I
And
was in AmeriCorps. I love
oh, wonderful. So I asked Joanna Macy. She's like, I think she's 90 now. She's been doing this work for over 50 years and has seen so much. And I said, there are these people who think that if we talk about the problems in the world, we're just going to create more of them. And that's the craziest thing that I can even think of. But I wanted to bring this to her as somebody who's navigated this like
Yeah.
through a lot of major social movements and has made her whole life's work around opening us to feel the difficult stuff so that we can then do something by moving through it.
Yeah.
And her response was so beautiful, and she said, like, none of our minds are that strong. None of us have the power in our own little noisy thoughts to create like
more problems
or racism. Like by being upset about racism, we're not going to create more racism. Like there's a whole field that generates these things. And when we come together in our thoughts to create something new, then yes, absolutely, something new will happen. But by individual people saying, I can't breathe, we're not going to destroy ourselves. Like that's, to me, that's the equivalent of taking mythic stories from any spiritual tradition and seeing them in the most literal, fact-based way. Like, did Moses part the Red Sea? Well, I don't know. It's not my path to really ponder that so much, but I don't think so. I think it's probably an idea that's trying to generate like a certain kind of understanding as opposed to so literal.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important, as people have left the major monotheistic religions of their upbringing and moved toward these more open, expansive paths, we need to look at those things in ourselves. Like, oh, our minds are trained to think a certain way, and we're carrying it with us into the path that we're now walking, and it can cause so much harm.
That's so important. And the thing is Dr. JoeDispenza said it best. He said, after the age of 30, 95% of us is committed to staying the same. Only 5% of us is ready for change. So that's why, like, I keep having these difficult discussions on Facebook and social media and stuff like that, because it has to be repetitive. It has to be repetitive. There's 5% of a person after the age of 30. And if you know, in our clientele, it's usually older women, between like late 40s to early 70s, is usually the demographic that comes out and have the time to come out for spiritual development. So when you look at it from that aspect, they've already settled in their mind about things. A lot of them, I always tell my white counterparts, you have at least a minimum of one specific memory where you've experienced racism in your household. You've heard people talk about it, about other cultures in a negative light, and it didn't sit well with you, kind of like what you started the conversation with, that you've experienced it yourself. And I'm like, and that's all I'm saying is go back to that uncomfortable feeling of what that felt like. Now, this is what people of color have to face on a day-to-day basis. If you didn't like it for that minute moment in time, why would you subject a whole group of people to keep experiencing it on a day-to-day basis? That and the anger that you felt about that, the filth, the disgust, right? And that's how I have to feel every single time. But then yet again, the system, the game is played in such a way that I can't fight back, right? That I have to sit there and take it day in, day out and keep my mouth shut and answer politely, even though people are screaming, I'll run you over with my car if I see you on the road. And I have to be witty, and I have to be a conversationalist, and I have to use humor, because I can't come out and say, try it, bitch, because I'm gonna run you over too. I can't say that, because then I become the angry Black woman or the angry brown woman, right? So it's just, that's all we're asking for is in the spiritual community is that you open your eyes to just how many layers this have. And what you feel, you're entitled to what you feel, but understand that it is just an opinion. Just like what I'm sharing and Angela is sharing is just an opinion. And we should understand that these are all opinions and not take it personally on that deeper level, you know? So law of attraction work, yeah, we need to do like a lot more talks on law of attraction, because I don't think people really get the gist of that. And especially when I see that people say, I've been doing law of attraction for years, but yet again, you don't have the house you want or the husband you want or the job you want, but you've been doing it for years, then it's not working because you're not doing it. The law of attraction is very easy to do.
Yeah.
You know?
The other thing, as I contemplate these words, I can't breathe. The power of people going to the streets and saying these words and sitting with these words or marching with these words, it's really like an opportunity to try it on, especially for people, white people who have never been in that kind of position in their lives.
Yeah.
To try it on and to truly imagine what it would be like to be in George Floyd's shoes, or literally fill in the blank, any of these people who have been brutally murdered. What is it like to feel that personally? And again, people who don't have to think about those things on a day-to-day basis often would rather not, but
Yeah.
we'll never awaken compassion in ourselves until we really sit with that and say, God, that really happened. And if it hadn't been caught on camera, the perpetrators would have gotten away with it again.
But look at what's going on in our country right now. It was caught on camera and it still took a week for them to get all 4 officers arrested and charged, even with viable evidence. And then they started coming back trying to say he didn't die from that. He died from COVID or heart problems or whatever. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm glad that this is out there in the open, because this is what we've had to deal with for our lives, you
Absolutely.
know?
So as we were talking earlier, another idea that came through the conversation was this kind of thinking as spiritual elitism, where people believe their practices, beliefs, or vibration is higher than others, which seems to be the very height of spiritual egotism, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What have you observed?
A lot of it. A lot of it. And funnily enough, from fellow spiritual teachers. It's interesting. It's interesting. I have to remind myself that nobody's perfect. And that's why when I hear the crap that comes out people's mouths, I can't judge. I just have to kind of hold space and say, so that's where your position is on it. One of the things that I've gotten over the years, like I said earlier in my introduction, I've certified in over 45 modalities. No, I don't have a record I'm trying to break. I just like to learn. And most of these classes that I take end up with a certificate at the end of it. That's it. That's all that is. Okay. I've had spiritual teachers in the area ask me if I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. What was the point of taking all those classes? This particular person was a medium, and she said, I just do mediumship. And I don't think your mediumship will be ever on the level of my mediumship, because I'm only concentrated on this. And you're watered down with several other modalities. And I've actually had a mentor I no longer work with tell me the same thing, that it was not necessary to learn all the other things, just stay in the one lane. And I'm like, between me and God, this has nothing to do with you and what he has sent me here for. So I'm just going to keep doing that. In the community itself, I've noticed it with my students. And usually it's the students who have taken a real strong oath of honor. I want a clean temple, clean body. I'm vegetarian or vegan. I don't drink alcohol. I'm celibate. I meditate 4 times a day. It's kudos to them, because I'm not at that level. It's amazing to be at that level. I've experienced it, in pockets of time throughout my life, like when I'm doing a cleanse or something, but consistently, no. So I admire people like that. What I don't admire is the words that come out of their mouth, which is because I've done all this work and I'm so clean and pure that I'm going to talk about things that you're not going to understand. And then I'm going to blame that lack of understanding on the fact that you're not at the level I'm at. This crap needs to stop. It is more harmful than it is helpful. And why is it harmful? It's because it's creating a divide in the community. I call them spiritual elitists. What spiritual elitists do is they shut down community. And as we can see right now, the biggest thing we need more than anything is community. We need peaceful communities where people can feel safe and appreciated and wanted and heard. So when we have a spiritual elitist in a class and they start talking about all the rights and wrongs of life as per their opinion, the first thing I do is remind them that that is just their opinion. It's like a bucket of cold water on some heat. They don't like it. And I do. I'm like, well, thank you for your opinion. No, no, no. This is okay. Well, thank you that you read his book. Thank you for yours and his opinion, you know? So we do have to eradicate it from the spiritual community. If you're practicing this, no worries. I got you. You don't have to come and apologize to me. Just stop it. Just if you've been doing this in classes and you know that to yourself, just own it and just stop it. That's all. And we all make mistakes. You know, and that's the one thing that I've noticed a lot of spiritual elitists have problems with is actually owning a mistake or saying sorry. There's like a form of gaslighting in there as well. You know, like you have to kind of listen to what I have to say. God speaks to me or Jesus speaks to me or somebody speaks to me. And I'm the only one carrying this truth. And I'm like, no, you're not. Jesus speaks to me too. Actually, Jesus spoke to me about the whole Moses thing. If you're open to hearing about the parable with the Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, he literally just said to me, actually, that was a metaphor for emotions because you had the people that were hurting you that were on the banks. And Moses is a metaphor for divine guidance coming in to help you to part your emotions, that you can walk through them to the other side. And then your emotions can become a calm sea and your prosecutors, the people who are not for you, are on the other side and you're safe. Again, a reference back to the need for spirituality. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
I love it. Thank you. That lands so much with my own understanding as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this whole spiritual elitism thing, like I've encountered regularly I've been following this path for like 20 something years now. And like, whenever, like I can usually feel it now before somebody even starts to open their mouth.
It's energy.
It's energy. It's projected out. But, whenever I'm with someone who projects an air of like better than, it's so clear that the things that they're practicing aren't integrated. Like it's amazing to be alcohol free. It's amazing to be eating a really clean diet based on whatever vision or values you have. It's amazing to be meditating all that time. It's amazing to be practicing spiritual disciplines. All of those things are wonderful choices. But if they're not actually transforming you into a more compassionate, kind, and understanding human being, you may as well be watching TV and eating Burger King because it's not impacting you. And we live in a culture that is based in competition and trying to get ahead and trying to like carve a name for ourselves, especially the social media world as it's unfolded has become so much about who has the most likes and who can make the most noise and get the most traction. But that's not the goal of any of this. And I think that that's a piece of the integration that hasn't happened yet in our culture. We're still, like the United States, I will say, is still a very immature culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't yet understand, by and large, the difference between like, okay, you want to compete to make the most money, or you want to compete to climb the corporate ladder, or you want to compete to be the like world's most passionate, like vegetarian meditator, whatever. Like,
but we do. And in America, we also push capitalism a lot.
Yeah.
We focus on capitalism, which, as you've seen in history, capitalism breaks up families, it breaks up communities. There's no we, there's only I. So that is the formation of it. But I'll tell you that in the indigenous cultures, as you know, Angela, a lot of indigenous cultures talk about when the early people came, there was two sets of people, the sky people and the earth people. What I personally feel is that the people that are drawn to be vegan and no alcohol and have that clean temple, I believe them to be the sky people. They're lightening their frequency. And really the sky people were meant to be like the oracles and the channelers and, where you need a higher vibration to communicate with those beings. Can I communicate with like Jesus and angels and stuff? Yeah, but I don't do it often because it does require a shift in my frequency to maintain that. I'm definitely on the earth people side. The earth people side are very much in love with the earth, the forest, the trees, the oceans, the animals, the people on the earth, and dealing with the day to day, you know? So when you start to look down on other people because they've chosen a path of being on the earth people, you are doing yourself a disservice, because we need both parts. The sky people can't survive without the earth people. The earth people feed them. The earth people cannot survive without the sky people, because the sky people inspire them. We work together, you know? So that's my thing to spiritual elitists. If you are recognizing what people are doing around you, you need to bump up your meditation practice, or probably you need to probably get out more in community and allow yourself to partake in community. Because if you start looking to the left and to the right and not straight ahead, you are not as far along as you think you are. You just aren't.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it takes a major personal experience of some kind to bring us to our knees in order to get humble again. And I know that's been one of the biggest paths of transformation in my own life, like loss and injury, and the things that have upended my world, that have shown me my limitations and my mortality, and that has awakened in me like this much deeper care for the day-to-day. Like, this may be the last one. How do I want to choose to show up in it? Like, I don't give a shit about if I'm better than anybody else. Like, It doesn't matter to me. I don't care if I'm climbing something, although I feel the anxiety of that from my culture still crawling up my back sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, but what did I notice in my world today? Like, what am I connecting to? What is in my heart? And what am I leaving behind? What is my trail?
Exactly.
Because if this is my last day on earth, like, what is my legacy? What have I chosen to leave behind? Those things are my responsibility. Worrying about what everybody else is doing is not really my responsibility.
Right. I agree with you 1,000%. And that's the truth of it, is that people are still staying in this moment of time, this pocket of time, and forgetting that we're eternal. And even though the body will shed and go off into the soul, we still need to say, did my life matter? How did it matter? And to whom did it matter? Every day I make it a point to bless 3 people every day. And I can bless them with reaching out and kind words. I can bless them with support. If I see them post something on social media and I can write in and give them a compliment, I can bless them financially. I can bless them with my time. So every day I look for 3 people to bless. And I think if the world did that, we would be a different place. It would take us outside of ourselves. For the longest time, I used to be a global volunteer. I will be again when my kids are older, but I would go to a country every 2 years and just do service work for a week. And I was put in some really crappy places. Like in Guatemala, it was for children of low-income families that couldn't go to school. So we pretty much fed them and kept them company and painted their little schoolhouse. In Peru, it was a home for abandoned older women, because what they were doing in Peru was, as Alzheimer's, pick up, they would fly with their aging mother or grandmother to, say, Lima, and then drop them off and leave them, and then go back to their. Now, some of you might be like, that's inhumane. No, that's the reality of life. They don't have money already as it is. They're not going to have money or time to take care of, like, if one of you guys here have a person, your parent has Alzheimer's, we can put them in a nursing home or in a care facility. They don't have that in Peru. So they drop them off and let them wander the streets until the place like I worked at found them and brought them in. When I get put in situations like that, it takes me outside of myself. And then it allows me to remember why I'm here. Like I said, I don't do the global volunteering as much anymore, but I do every single year, I do a walkabout. And if you don't know what a walkabout is, it's an Aborigines term from Australia, where their original people, their indigenous people, every year would go and take a walkabout, which is like a spiritual quest. It's a discovery of yourself. So for me, I would travel by myself without my kids, my partner, my friends, and I would just go to a new place and be part of that place for a couple of days to a week or 2 weeks, and just see what that feels like, having to, again, fend for myself and be on my own. and just connect with spirit, great spirit, and say, and remind myself again, like, why am I here? What am I doing this for? We need to see more of that. Like I tried, in 2017, I tried to start my global goddess retreats because I love to travel. And I tried taking some women to Mount Shasta, California to create that. But I didn't really have the support to do it. I did it. It was a very small group, only 3 people. But you need like a lot of support because I want to focus just on the classes, you know, and like the stuff that I can do. I do a lot of shadow work. So getting you in touch with your feelings. But when you have to be like the retreat organizer and, you know, the concierge and everything, it's a lot, you know?
Absolutely. Having spent the last 6 years leading retreats in Peru and Costa Rica, I am doing everything myself. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is very much hard to walk in all those positions at the same time and do the deep work that you want with people. But I don't think I shared with you that I actually went to graduate school to study pilgrimage, and
Wow.
I had walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain in 2004, and it was
How long did it take
truly
you? How long did it take you?
40 days. 40 days on foot with my pack. I went alone. I met amazing people who are still important people in my life now.
Yeah.
But I was so changed by that it actually, it kind of took over my life. And that's what took me to Peru the first time. And I traveled to China and Tibet, and I traveled in Europe, and I created this whole study, as well as doing a lot of my own creative writing, looking at what does it mean to travel in the 21st century when we're not given like cultural or religious kind of dictates for what that looks like. What is pilgrimaging about? Like, what are we trying to do? And like, that has been a huge part of my own life too. And it's been a huge part of my education as a citizen of the whole planet, not just of the US. Like, who am I when all of the things that uphold my mind and my patterns and my day-to-day existence, when all of that is gone, who
Wow.
am I? And walking in that without those things has really allowed me to unfold my heart, and to unfold my intuition, and to explore and to connect and to understand in a very deep way, like that we're all brothers and sisters and family. And these crazy things that are unfolding, like right now with all of these uprisings and protests, like if we all see each other as our brothers and sisters and family, who can we do this to? Who can we allow to die? Like, I can't imagine any mother seeing her son brutalize somebody. Basically, it's like bullying professionally.
Yeah, it
like,
is.
like, I can't imagine any mama would be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, this is not okay. But we've like lost touch with the fact that we are all like one big global family. And sadly, as those ideas emerge in this conversation, they're a spiritual bypass.
Yes.
Like they want to disregard all of the pain and suffering and just, la la la, we're all
Love and
good.
light.
Well, we're not all good. It's not all love and light. There's a whole lot of pain.
Yeah. Spiritual bypassing is a crime to me. It's a crime to me because what the term spiritual bypassing means is that on a personal level, if you see somebody going through something and experiencing a painful situation in their life, if you come at it with this too shall pass, you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's going to be okay, just love and light it away, you are creating further damage to that person. Because what people go through on a psychological level when they're being spiritually bypassed runs the gamut from shame. I should know better. I'm on this spiritual path for 30 years. Why don't I know better? To guilt. Yes, I know that I'm wallowing in my depression, but actually I feel good here. I just want to stay here. To fear. Oh my gosh, now they see me and they're probably going to judge me and think less of me. There's so many emotions that get set off with the spiritual bypassing. And I understand the intent. I understand the good naturedness of people who just want to help. But again, I go back to, unless you are a spiritual teacher, unless you are trained or have done some amount of shadow work, you really don't want to speak on it. And this is where we see examples of where people trying to help actually backfire. Because the first thing people want to do is say, this is my friend that's hurting. I want to help them. I'm not going to have her spend money on a teacher or a healer or whatever. I'm going to do it. But then you don't do it. And then your friend's probably going to just say nice things to you to appease you, but the pain is still there. Then that pain rots and it festers and it grows into wounds that cannot be healed, even if they're seen by the most gifted of healers, because it is set too far in, and either we cut the leg off or we just let it consume the poison, consume the whole body. You know, your greatest advocate, I tell to people who are spiritual bypassers, that your greatest advocate that you can be for people who are hurting is to refer them out. Instead of trying to fix it, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Either hold space for them or refer them out.
Yeah. And hold space for them in a way where you're not necessarily even saying anything.
Yeah, just
like the desire to fix is so strong, and what is it we're trying to fix anyway? And I think even worse is like we do that to ourselves if we choose the path of spiritual bypass. We don't want to look at those things. We judge ourselves. We shame ourselves, and we push away the full spectrum of the human experience. And, so my father died in the fall of 2016, and he was my best friend. And it's the first really deep loss that I had in my adult life. And there's so many people that just don't know how to be with grief, for example. So after losing my father, I sunk into a grief that was the kind of grief that makes you feel like you're going to bleed out forever, and there will never be an end to it. And there's so many people that just didn't know how to be with that. And being as far along the path as I was at that point already, I was also able to kind of watch, how are people responding to me? How does that make me feel? How do I want to show up for others? How do I want to learn from this experience so that I can model something different for others? And people don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't want other people's discomfort to rock their boat, because what is it, like an infection?
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Like a plague, it's going to pass on to them.
No, you're not going to catch it. A person is not going to get stuck in grief or anger or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a feeling. It's an experience that is expressing the truth of what's in their heart in the moment. And when we spiritual bypass ourselves in that, we harm ourselves. We tell ourselves there's a part of us that's not acceptable, that we must divorce away or throw away or sweep under the rug. But it doesn't go. It just continues to fester, as you said so beautifully before. And that is a problem. We are cutting off our humanity and doing that. And instead of becoming more compassionate, kind, enlightened beings, we're actually becoming a shell of that. Just a happy face. It was like Disney spirituality. Put on a happy face and just try to pretend everything is fine all the time. Well, everything's not fine all the time.
Yeah. And that's the thing, the holding, I actually want to do a workshop on holding space, but I'm laughing because I'm it's just literally people sitting there facing another person for, 30 minutes and just sitting there and letting that person talk. And you would think that's so easy, but I remember Queen Elizabeth said it once, the hardest thing to do is to not do anything, because she's pretty much built her life on not doing anything, but just be she's, to me, the queen of holding space. She can't really, add to all the turmoil that's going on, but just be like a beacon of hope, right? And beacon of light. And that's what we're called to do. And that's why I say to people, when you see somebody hurting, the best thing you can do for that person is connect them to somebody who can hold space, who can listen without objections, or who can provide in a more ministerial or spiritual role what they need. Because this pain that we've been avoiding since Eve gave Adam that apple. Let me put it that way. Okay. We've been avoiding it. And the thing is when you learn to lean into it, I love Pema Chodron, and she wrote a book. I believe it was called When Things Fall Apart.
Well, I've read it many times.
Love that book, right? And I
Me
love
too.
how she says about lean into the pain. Don't avoid it. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. And I remember I was going through a particularly hard breakup in my life at that time. And I read her book. And the thing is with grief and with loss is that it doesn't happen consistently. You kind of like just live life, and then something reminds you of that person. And it's like a pang that hits you. And I followed Pema on this, and I said, okay, where is it? Let me locate it. Because she was very keen about locate it in your body. And I was like, locate it in my body. And I sat with it. And then it moved, it shifted to somewhere else in my body. And then I sat with it. And then finally, it was painful. It was excruciatingly painful. And I thought I was going to die, just allowing myself to sit with the pain and the grief and everything that came up with it. And then finally, when it was done, I felt relief. And I looked at my watch because I was timing myself. I'm like, oh my God, I must have been here for an hour, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And that released me from ever holding in pain again. Because in our minds, we feel like if I allow myself to go into this, it's going to be forever. No,
Yeah.
It literally lasts you 2 minutes and less.
Yeah. And so when you encounter people who believe that there are certain feelings and experiences that are good or others that should be avoided entirely, such as what we were talking about before, like anger is wrong, I should never be angry. How do you navigate that?
I tend to tell people when you work with me, we're looking at the whole individual, not pieces or not a persona that we're trying to fit or to be. So I actually have one of like my popular workshops is like celebrate the wrongness of me. And it's meant to catch people's attentions because what is the wrongness of me? Everything that you've been told is wrong about you is the wrongness of you. So we're going to celebrate that now. So I do a lot of like mind shifting. Tell me something about yourself that you don't like. And we rework it into seeing the beauty of it. So for me, for instance, just using myself, I never liked how outspoken I was and how I always caused trouble by me being outspoken. Like, why can't you just shut your mouth, Uma, and just ride this one out? No, got a mouth on me, And then I had to rework that into, I am the bringer of change. I am a catalyst for transformation. My voice speaks for the millions who cannot speak. And then that's when it became lighter to me. So then it became so light to the point that whenever I heard again, Uma, why can't you just shut your mouth? I would actually come back with ferocious veracity. Never will I again shut my mouth. You don't know who depends on me to speak for them, So for people who feel like, again, with owning certain parts of who you are, I'm what people call a shadow healer. I love working in the shadows. I love looking at what's sticking people and trying to figure out, why is this still an issue? How is it an issue? And what can we do to make it less of an issue? Because the thing is your shadow self is just here to remind you that you're human. For me, I have anger. The upside, now the lower manifestation of anger is anger and violence and threat. The higher echelon of anger is activism.
Right.
Catalyst, transformation, transmutation, the alchemist, right? So you have to look at what it is that's in your shadow self. For me, my shadow side is anger. You come for me, you're going to get a whole lot of Uma, okay? You're gonna get it good, okay? But for other people, I'm well aware their shadow side is fear, insecurities, anxiety, worry, lack of self-belief, lack of self-confidence. So the thing is you want to take what your shadow side is and then rework it,
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to play with this for a moment myself.
Yes.
So I think one of my worst qualities, my wife would absolutely affirm this, is impatience. I am not a patient person, whether it's like some little silly thing or something major like global transformation and justice. But that impatience, if I look at it for the value of it, that impatience is a push for change that is unrelenting, that will not back off.
How I would rework that, I would say that I wouldn't say that you're impatient. I would say that you're claircognizant. because claircognizance is the gift of knowing. And when you are, say, impatient with a person, it's not so much, it's about your time, it's about, about their ability. So where the impatience comes up is, I'm not impatient with you wasting my time. I'm impatient because I know where you can be, and you were actively choosing not to be there. And that frustrates me, thereby making me impatient with you.
Yeah.
And impatience with the world that you see is because you know better. You know what the world could be like. And when you see people not getting it or not moving in that direction, then it becomes impatience, because the same thing that they're wanting is the same thing you're seeing. And the path is laid out, and all they got to do is step on the path, and we'll all get there together.
Yep. Oh, but change comes slowly because old habits die hard.
Yeah.
And
well, give me a machete. Let me kill that for you real quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you don't have to die so slow, so hard.
Yeah. I love it. And I hope that our listeners will really contemplate this idea of spiritual bypass and how we use the noble ideas of the different metaphysical traditions that call our hearts sometimes to get out of accountability with ourselves and others. And that's really not the point. That's really not where we could navigate our world and our evolution. Like, that will not create the change that will allow this to be a place that is more just for all.
Yeah.
As the world is uprising against racism and police brutality right now, I witnessed a lot of these conversations in which white spiritual people have used this spiritual elitism and spiritual bypass to promote harmful ideas like all lives matter, as well as promoting only peaceful protests that allow little room for grief and rage. I would love to hear you speak on this, because I know it's close to your heart, like it is mine.
It's very close to my heart as a woman of color and as a mother to 2 biracial children that are half Black, with my ex-husband being Black. It's very much on my heart personally and then professionally as well. Let's just start with one thing here. Let's just focus in for a moment on the all lives matter. When you say all lives matter, first of all lives matter is known. Everybody knows that from the beginning of time. But the actual slogan, all lives matter, was not born in a vacuum. It wasn't born in a test tube baby kind of thing. It was in direct response to when people were chanting Black Lives Matter. So you want to sit and think about that for a second. What you're chanting, all lives matter, literally was born during a movement calling for change, for equality of Black people, in response to the chant, all Black Lives Matter. Do you want to be on that side of history? That's the first thing I want to bring up about that. The second thing I want to bring up about all lives matter is when you say it, you are saying it to appease yourself. Again, that is not a selfless act. A selfless act is when you hold space for people that are going through something. If you have somebody that you love, you have a husband or a wife or a partner, and you say to that partner, I love you. And they say to you, I love everyone. That's not what you want to hear. Especially when you're hurting and you're vulnerable and you're scared and you say to your partner, I love you. What you're really wanting is to hear that person look at you, see you, identify with you, and say to you, I love you too. And that is the basis of Black Lives Matter, is that we're not saying Black people are higher than other people or they have more significance. We're saying this is a community that has been targeted and racial profiled and hurt and killed, and they're screaming out in pain and agony. And all you have to do is say, I love you. And their I love you is Black Lives Matter. So as you navigate the racism and the cops' brutality and everything, where you want to go with this is you want to take yourself out of the picture. And you want to see it from the greater scheme of things. I understand you have family members that are police officers, but those police officers are not being targeted right now. we are calling out the police officers who have continuously shown terrible behavior and violence to people, specifically people of color, specifically Black people. So if you start to get emotionally riled up because you feel this is a hit against cops, stop it. That's not what this ever was. Own the fact that you are feeling these things. Own it. Deal with it, heal it, process it, then come back out and join the fight. Because here's the thing, what I keep telling people. Everybody feels they're so like, this has nothing to do with me. Oh, yes, it does. Because there is very much a larger presence that's trying to squelch the voices of individual people and make us what we call sheeple. We just all follow the norm and we do what we're told to do. If you don't join this fight, because it's a revolution right now. It's not even just a riot or a protest. We are now creating lawmaking changes right now, right? When you go back to the Riots Act of 1968, we're in history right now. So if you don't lend your voice to this and make sure that this goes through perfectly fine and well, then Black people will continue to be enslaved in their current conditions. And once the system has realized that they're enslaved and they're good, they're not going to move anywhere, they're going to move on next to women. Then they're going to move on to LGBTQ. Then they're going to move on to people with disabilities. It's not going to stop. Because the truth is that the larger overlying system does not want to see you grow or see you happy or see you peaceful or see all of us getting along. So my call to all of the spiritual community, Black Lives Matter. We join our voices. We fight the good fight for Black people everywhere, not just in America. Okay. It has been the greatest injustice done to Black people. They were not allowed to leave Africa on their own terms. They were taken from Africa. And we can't just like whitewash over that in history. Okay. A lot of Black people all over the world are not there because they want to be there. They're there because they were stolen from their land. Okay. So let's own that. Let's understand that. So the oppression, the anger has been filtered down through the years, through the generations, in the blood to where it's at now. And all we're asking of you is to use your privilege, use your spirituality, use your voice for people that don't have a voice, and do it whichever way you want. Hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Amen to that. Okay. So as we close our conversation today, I am curious if you could share with us some of the wisdom from your book, The Awakened Life, to inspire further contemplation on these things we've been discussing.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. The Awakened Life was written by me in 2014 to talk about what life was like back then when I was awakening. Well, I wasn't awakening in 2014. I was awakening before that, but I took some years to process it. And then I put in like things that you will experience as you're awakening. And I think one of the fitting messages that I wrote back then that applies to today is about your need for community. We need to have community because as we weren't meant to come to this earth and do this all alone. And as you experience your awakening and your developing of your spiritual path, it's going to get quite scary. And the people around you aren't going to understand you anymore or hear you anymore because you've now taken on this new consciousness. Find yourself a community, be part of it and engage in it. Attend classes, reach out to people from your classes and go out for coffee and have conversations. This is all part of your spiritual path. And I just want to leave you guys with that because I think community is the most important thing.
I couldn't agree more. Community is everything.
Yeah.
Uma, I can't thank you enough for taking this time with us today to share your thoughts and to open this conversation. And I hope that our listeners have enjoyed this talk and have learned a lot from what has been shared here today. At the end of this video, you'll be able to find a link to Uma's website so that you can learn more about her good work in the world, as well as her book, The Awakened Life. And I hope that you will check that out. And I hope that you will stay connected with us as each Friday we continue to release new talks from inspiring, amazing people who are doing such incredible work in the world. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
It was so wonderful to have you with us.